Welcome to Sleepy Historian, where old tales whisper by candlelight and memories gently drift into dreams. Tonight, let us journey back to a time long asleep in history.
In the vast expanse of the 19th century sea, there existed a peculiar occupation. These men, they were whalers, navigators of the endless ocean expanse, were driven by the obsession of the age, the relentless pursuit of whales. But the reality of their lives was far from the romanticized image of swashbuckling adventure. Their days and nights were an endless cycle of tasks, each one a testament to the monotonous misery of their existence. The wearer's day began before sunrise and ended after sunset. Each moment was accounted for, leaving no room for rest. Their morning began with the chilling sight of their previous day's catch, the decaying remains of a whale, a constant reminder of their gruesome trade. The process of preparing the carcass, stripping away the useless parts, and rendering the oil was a long and tedious affair, made worse by the unbearable stench that permeated their entire ship. Once completed, the wearer's next duty was equally unappealing, cleaning the decks. This wasn't merely a chore, it was a necessity to prevent disease. The rotting waste, if left unattended, would attract vermin and breed illness, turning the ship into a floating coffin. As the day wore on, the whalers stood at the ready, manning the ship's ropes, hoisting sails, and adjusting rigging. Their muscles screamed in protest, their skin blistered and tore, yet rest was a luxury they couldn't afford. For their next task awaited, lowering the whaleboat. This meant hours of paddling in the open sea, battling currents and weather, all in search of their next quarry. When a whale was sighted, the chase began, a desperate dance between man and beast, exhausting, dangerous, and unending. Sometimes the hunt was successful, sometimes the whale got away. But either way, the whalers returned to the ship, drenched, exhausted, and hungry. Their meals were a meager affair, salt pork and hard bread, washed down with weak tea. No sauces, spices, or fresh ingredients, just a bland, tasteless diet that barely sustained them. But even this small pleasure was often taken away. Storms would toss the ship like a toy, making eating a hazardous activity. Illness would turn meals into a torment, and the ceaseless cries of gulls and the smell of rotting fish would make any food unappetizing. In the dark hours after sunset, the work continued. The whalers cleaned their equipment, repaired damaged gear, and tended to the wounded among them. Injuries were common and serious, from cuts and bruises to broken bones and disfigurements caused by the sharp tools and heavy equipment. There was no respite for these men, not in their work, not in their meals, not even in their sleep. For the rocking of the ship, the creaking of the mast, and the haunting cries of seabirds were their nightly lullaby. These men, though, were not mere victims of circumstance. They were participants in a grand obsession that had captured the imagination of 19th century America, the hunt for whales. And to understand their story, we must turn our attention to the men who led them, the captains. Among them, one name stands out, George Pollard Jr. He, along with another captain named Owen Chase, embodied the spirit of the age, a dangerous, almost insane determination to conquer the seas and harness its bounty. Pollard's story, like those of many whalers, was deeply entwined with the sea. He too had spent countless days on the ocean, learning its moods and mastering its ways. But he wasn't content with merely sailing the seas. He wanted more. He wanted to conquer them. So he did what many young men of his time did. He became aware. At first, he learned under experienced captains, observing their techniques, understanding their strategies, and gradually building his own expertise. But soon he was ready to venture out on his own. He purchased a ship, assembled a crew, and set sail into the vast unknown. Like many whaling captains, Pollard was driven by a deep obsession, a singular focus on his mission that bordered on the fanatical. He was willing to endure months, even years, at sea, enduring hardships and battling dangers, all for the promise of the ultimate prize, the whale. He wasn't motivated by mere profit, but by a desire to test himself against nature's most powerful creature, to tame the wild and bring order to the chaotic seas. His dedication to his craft, while admirable, was also his undoing. It pushed him to take risks, to venture into uncharted waters, and to defy the very laws of nature. But Pollard wasn't alone in this obsession. Another captain shared his passion, a man named Owen Chase. Together, they formed a kind of fellowship, a brotherhood of hunters united by their love for the sea and their desire for adventure. Chase, like Pollard, had the typical look of a seafarer, a weather-beaten face, a strong, muscular frame, and eyes that had seen the depths of the ocean and the heights of the sky. He, too, was driven by an almost mad obsession with whales. But there was a difference between them. While Pollard's obsession was more about conquering the seas, Chase's was about understanding the whale itself. He studied their movements, their habits, and their anatomy with the kind of scientific curiosity that was rare among whalers. He saw the whale not just as a source of oil and profit, but as a magnificent creature, a marvel of evolution and a testament to the power of nature. This duality of obsession, the desire to conquer and the urge to understand, perfectly captured the spirit of the age. An era when America was rapidly industrializing, expanding its horizons and exploring the unknown. And so these two men, Pollard and Chase, became legends, their names synonymous with the golden age of whaling and their stories serving as a reminder of the obsessive nature of men. But their stories also hinted at something darker, something that lurked beneath the surface of their seemingly glorious adventures, a lurking sense of dread, and the knowledge that their obsession, while profitable, was also dangerous and ultimately self-destructive. Join us next time as we dive into the heart of their chilling tale aboard the Essex, a ship that dared to venture too far, a voyage that would end in tragedy, leaving only one survivor to tell the haunting tale. Moby Dick is the stuff of legend. The white whale, the obsessive captain, the doomed crew, they're as ingrained in our cultural consciousness as King Lear or Dracula. But Moby Dick wasn't just some literary fluke. Its author, Herman Melville, wrote about whaling because he knew it firsthand. Before he penned his masterpiece, he had sailed the oceans as an ordinary sailor, including time on a whaling ship. But while we know much about the story behind the book, the world that inspired it, the actual act of whaling itself is lesser known. How did those crews catch those enormous beasts? What was the process of turning a whale into oil? To answer these questions, we have to turn to real life and imagine ourselves aboard a whaling ship, about to catch our own monster. It's easy to think of whaling as simple. Harpoon, chase, kill. But in reality, catching a whale was anything but easy. No one knows how many men died trying to catch white whales, but we do know that many perished in the attempt. First, you needed to find a whale. This was harder than it sounds because despite their size, whales can move fast, sometimes up to 23 miles per hour. When a sighting was made, the crew would pull out the ship's whaleboat. These were smaller boats designed specifically for hunting whales. They were swift and sturdy, able to handle rough seas and the force of a thrashing whale. Crews rowed out to the creature, usually a 3-man team with a harpooner and 2 rowers. If you didn't want to drown or get dragged under, you needed to be strong. Sometimes crews would have to row for hours to catch up to their prey. Then came the hard part, actually catching the animal. Hunting sperm whales like Moby Dick was particularly fraught. Sperm whales are huge, reaching lengths of over 60 feet and weighing up to 45 tons. They were fast and incredibly powerful, capable of sinking a boat or dragging its occupants into the depths. So how did they manage it? Well, it took strategy and skill. One rower steered the boat, keeping it close behind the whale. Another rowed with all his might to keep up with the animal as it dove and twisted. Meanwhile, the harpooner waited for his chance. His job was not only to throw the harpoon, but also to ensure that it landed in the right place. Harpoons were designed to embed themselves in the whale's fatty blubber, not in the water. Just missing the mark could mean the difference between a successful hunt and a wild, dangerous melee. Once lodged, the harpooner attached a rope to the line connecting the harpoon to the whale. The game was then a battle of strength and endurance. The crew had to reel in the whale, keeping the line tight, preventing the animal from escaping and tiring itself out too much. This could take minutes or hours, depending on the whale's strength and the crew's skill. As the exhausted whale finally breached the surface, it was time for the kill. Crews used lances with sharp metal points coated in hot musket balls. The lance would pierce the whale, delivering a fatal blow. Now, death wasn't instantaneous. Whales could thrash and dive after being hit, which added another layer of danger to the hunt. The crew had to secure the line, prevent the whale from tangling them, and stay safe. Finally, when the whale was dead, it was time to bring it back to the ship. This was a delicate operation. The crew had to ensure that the carcass was undamaged, minimizing waste. The whale was then hoisted onto the ship using cranes and blocks, a testament to both the brute strength of the whale and the ingenuity and determination of the crew. The dismantling of the carcass began immediately. The process of rendering the whale fat into oil was complex and involved cutting the blubber into small pieces and boiling it for hours over an open fire. The remaining oil was collected, filtered, and stored in barrels ready to be transported back to shore. Every step was crucial in ensuring that the valuable resource was extracted efficiently and effectively. Whaling was a dangerous business. Injuries and even deaths were common. The work was arduous, and the living conditions on board were cramped and unsanitary. Sailors suffered from scurvy, a disease caused by vitamin C deficiency, and other illnesses due to contaminated water and lack of basic sanitation. Storms were a constant threat and could easily capsize or damage the ships. Not to mention encounters with whales could turn deadly. Sometimes the whales would capsize the boats or drag crew members into the sea. Even though it may seem barbaric by today's standards, whaling was an important industry in the 19th century. The oil from these creatures was used for lighting, powering machinery, and even making soap and candles. Whalebone was used in ladies' corset stays, umbrella ribs, and buggy whips. Whale meat was not wasted either. It was either salted and eaten by the crew or rendered into a substance similar to sausage. Whaling played a major role in the economy of many coastal towns and provided jobs and income for hundreds of thousands of people. It connected cultures and spurred trade around the globe. Without whaling, many aspects of 19th century life, art, and industry would have been vastly different. So what happened to whaling? Why don't we see images of crews battling giant whales anymore? Whaling declined for multiple reasons. As technology advanced, alternative sources of oil like kerosene became available. The demand for whale oil dropped significantly. The growth of the environmental movement also played a big role. As people learned more about the intelligence, grace, and sheer scale of whales, they began to question the practice of hunting them. Ultimately, international cooperation led to the protection of whales through organizations like the International Whaling Commission. Today, whaling is largely a thing of the past. The hunts are now rare and regulated events, far from the daily routine it once was. Images of whale hunts are mostly found in old photographs and paintings. The closest we come to reliving these hunts is by visiting museums or watching documentaries. Even then, it's hard to truly comprehend the scale and brutality of whaling without experiencing it firsthand. It is almost impossible for us to imagine what it must have been like to stand on the deck of a ship surrounded by the vast ocean. The salt spray stinging your face, the cries of the whales echoing in the distance. Or to be in the tiny boat, the whale thundering past, the harpooner poised, ready to strike. These images and experiences belong to another time, a time when the world was less tamed, less regulated, and humanity's relationship with nature was much more raw and visceral. We live in a world where innovation meets tradition, where ancient techniques are given a modern twist. That's why, and that's all for this video. See you next time. The year is 1820, and a whaling ship named the Essex sails from Nantucket, Massachusetts, on a voyage to the South Pacific. The mission: capture sperm whales for their oil. The Essex, along with several other ships from Nantucket and New Bedford, heads toward what is now known as the Polynesian Triangle, a region in the Indian and Pacific Oceans known for its giant waves, unpredictable storms, and above all, an abundance of whales. The Polynesian Triangle was, for the sailors of the Essex, uncharted territory, an adventure fraught with danger. Whale oil prices were high back in New England, which meant the potential for wealth was also high. But the journey was perilous. Storms, starvation, scurvy, and of course, the whales themselves posed constant threats. When the Essex arrived in the Pacific, the whales were few and the hunts were poor. The ship's supplies began to dwindle. By November, they were critically low on food and water, and they had caught nothing worthwhile in weeks. This went against everything Captain George Pollard Jr. had learned about the whaling industry. It was typically at this time of year that the waters teemed with whales. With no choice but to press on, Pollard decided to take his three-man crew further south, hoping to find better hunting grounds. On November 20th, 1820, the Essex found itself in open waters, calm and peaceful. It was then that the lookout cried out, "There she blows." An enormous sperm whale, larger than any they'd seen before, had breached the surface not far from the ship. Pollard gave the order to fire, and the Essex charged after the whale. A violent struggle ensued, ropes cut and snapped. The seas churned, and finally, the enraged whale rammed the Essex head-on, destroying the ship's planks and puncturing a hole below the waterline. Realizing that their ship was doomed, the crew abandoned the Essex and clambered into the 3 lifeboats, sharing the little food and water they had left. They set sail, hoping to catch wind of land, praying for rescue. Their ordeal was just beginning. For 90 days, the men aboard the Essex drifted across the ocean, enduring scorching heat, torrential rain, and dwindling rations. The relentless sun beat down on them, making thirst unbearable. They caught fish, but it was salty and hard to eat. Hunger gnawed at their bellies, weakening them day by day. Of the 20 men in the 3 boats, only 8 would survive. Some succumbed to dehydration, others to the elements, and still others simply disappeared, overtaken by despair or madness. On March 1821, after 90 days at sea, the 3 boats were separated by winds and currents. 2 of the boats with 8 people on board washed ashore on Henderson Island, part of the Indian Ocean archipelago of the Prince of Wales, or as it is known today, the Chagos Archipelago. The 3rd boat, containing 4 men, landed on a small coral reef. Only one of the 4 survived the ordeal, suffering permanent blindness as a result of drinking salt water. Those who landed on Henderson Island found fruit, fresh water, and most importantly, a wrecked ship, the Mary Celeste, which had been abandoned 2 years prior. They took what they needed to survive and waited for rescue. Meanwhile, Thomas Nickerson, the sole survivor of the 3rd boat, managed to drag himself onto a beach near the island of Mauritius. All around him lay the bodies of his companions, victims of the unforgiving sea. Rescued by local fishermen, he was taken off the island and given water, food, and clothing. When he recovered, he learned that those from the other lifeboat had been rescued as well. Out of the 20 men who had set sail on the Essex, only 8 survived. Of the 8 who reached Mauritius, only 6 lived beyond a year. Captain Pollard died in 1871. Nickerson passed away in 1883. the last living link to the Essex. Those who perished, like the Essex itself, became part of the endless ocean, their names and faces lost to time. And yet, despite the tragedies that befell them, a spirit of adventure continued to call to men like moths to a flame. The allure of the sea, the promise of discovery and fortune remained undimmed. Each new voyage was a dance with fate, a gamble against the whims of the weather and the creatures of the deep. But the lessons of the Essex were not forgotten. Lives were forever altered by encounters with the immense and unknowable forces of nature. Its tale, though muted, continued to echo across the waves, a somber reminder of humanity's enduring fascination with the mysteries and perils of the deep. Today, the Essex is remembered not just as a tragic event, but as a pivotal moment in maritime history. The story of its ill-fated voyage served as the inspiration for one of the greatest American novels, Moby Dick by Herman Melville. In Melville's epic tale, the obsessive Captain Ahab relentlessly pursues the white whale that took his leg, mirroring the desperate hunt for survival undertaken by the crew of the Essex. Beyond its literary impact, the story of the Essex led to significant changes in maritime practices. It prompted the development of new safety regulations and a reassessment of whaling practices in the face of the ship's catastrophic demise. Melville wrote to Nathaniel Hawthorne, "Who shall I dedicate the book to? I am almost tempted to inscribe it for the first time in book form to Old Man Death, who has done such good business on the line of the equator." The tale of the Essex serves as a testament to the human spirit as indomitable will to survive against all odds. The harrowing ordeal of its crew continues to captivate us, reminding us of the relentless power of nature and the depths of human endurance. While the Essex and its crew may be long gone, their story continues to resonate in our collective memory, echoing across the ages as a timeless tale of survival, obsession, and the unforgiving embrace of the sea. As the Essex sailed deeper into the Pacific, its crew seeking the bounty of distant waters, back in Nantucket, life unfolded in a very different rhythm. Here on the shore, the whaling industry was at its peak, transforming Nantucket into a hub of commerce and culture, all fueled by the mysterious depths of the sea. But how did this remote island community manage to flourish so dramatically? The answer lay in the intricate network of trade and commerce that connected Nantucket not only to the rest of New England, but to distant markets around the world. The streets of Nantucket were a microcosm of this global exchange. Quaint and charming by today's standards, they were once bustling thoroughfares filled with merchants, sailors, and townspeople going about their daily business. At the center of this activity stood elegant buildings, many crafted from the same gingerbread trim and white clapboard siding that adorned so many New England homes. But these houses were not just picturesque. They were symbols of a town built on the riches of the sea. Stepping inside one of these houses was entering a world of refined comfort. Walls were adorned with artwork depicting pastoral scenes or exotic locales, hinting at the far-reaching nature of Nantucket's trade. Ornate mirrors reflected candlelight flickering from candelabras, casting dancing shadows on handcrafted rugs imported from the east. In the dining rooms, fine-bone china glistened with each setting, a silent testament to long sea voyages that braved treacherous waters to bring luxury to the dinner table. Table settings like this were not just for everyday meals. They were also a display of wealth and status during special occasions, especially during the whaling season. The arrival of a ship laden with precious oils and the news of a successful hunt would often be cause for celebration. Imagine the gasps of delight as a young girl, perhaps. The daughter of a ship's owner gazes up at a vase like this, its cobalt blue hue a splash of color, against the backdrop of her otherwise white and pristine surroundings. It wouldn't be out of place in a home where the walls themselves tell stories of faraway lands through their wallpaper. Patterns inspired by Chinese landscapes or Turkish motifs danced across the surface, a reflection of the global nature of Nantucket's trade. These patterns were more than just decorative. They were a conversation piece, a way to impress guests with tales of adventure and far-flung destinations. And above it all, suspended from the ceilings, chandeliers glittered, casting pools of light that transformed each room into a realm of elegance. Crystal prisms refracted candlelight, scattering it like diamonds across the richly patterned carpets below. But it wasn't just about opulence. These chandeliers provided a practical function as well. Back then, gaslighting was still a novelty, and most homes relied on candles or oil lamps for illumination. A single misstep could send a house into darkness, which in a home filled with fine furnishings and expensive wares was not a trivial matter. In the bedrooms, tranquility reigned. Four-poster beds draped in fine linens offered a sanctuary of softness after a day spent in the bustling world of whaling. Cushions plump and inviting invited rest and relaxation, while delicate curtains, often hand-sewn, framed windows that looked out onto the sea or the town. In quieter moments, these rooms might have echoed with the gentle strum of a harp as a lady of the house, elegantly dressed in a gown of the finest silk, sat by the window contemplating the day ahead. Each room in these grand houses tells a story of a life lived in the lap of luxury, far removed from the harsh realities of whaling. Yet the industry that made this lifestyle possible loomed ever present in the back of the mind. Every beautiful object brought to these shores through trade had its counterpart in the sea, and the lines between the luxurious life and the perilous hunts blurred as families gathered to share stories of the day. A sketch or the latest news from far-off trading posts, these homes were not just places of residence. They were centers of social life, hosting parties and events that were the talk of the town. Imagine a grand ballroom, its polished wooden floor gleaming under the glow of crystal chandeliers. Here, on special occasions, men and women would come together for balls and soirees. The air filled with the strains of a string quartet playing lively tunes as couples twirled and waltzed. The rhythmic beat of the dance echoed the pulse of the town, a heartbeat that was as much a part of Nantucket as the crashing waves on its shores. And yet, for all their beauty and luxury, these grand houses bore silent witness to the darker aspects of Nantucket's prosperity. The wealth they displayed was built on the back of a relentless industry that demanded a heavy toll. The lives of the men who went to sea were harsh and dangerous, and the comforts of these houses served as a constant reminder of what was at stake. With every bale of whale oil brought ashore, the men who risked their lives could envision the finished products that would soon grace homes like these. Their labor, though unseen, was essential to maintaining the lavish lifestyle that unfolded within these four walls. In the heart of these houses, a ticking grandfather clock chimed softly, marking the passage of time with an air of quiet authority. Its pendulum swung rhythmically, a metronome keeping watch over the world outside. For the men who went to sea, the ticking of these clocks represented not just the passing of time, but the rhythm of their lives. Each tick was a reminder of the loved ones waiting for their return, and each chime echoed the hope for safe passage home. These clocks, silent observers of the daily grind, bore witness to the hopes and dreams that anchored the men to the island life. In the parlors of these grand homes, sofas upholstered in rich fabrics like velvet or brocade stood as symbols of a life of leisure. Often crafted from the finest woods, such as mahogany or rosewood, these pieces were not just functional, but works of art in their own right. The wood, polished to a high sheen, gleamed invitingly, promising relaxation and comfort. Tucked away in cozy corners, side tables held not just books, but intricate models of ships, reminders of the town's maritime roots. One of the most fascinating elements of these parlors were the cabinets, not just for their ornate designs or the quality of the wood, but for what they concealed. Behind glass doors, intricately carved, were displayed an array of curiosities, each with its own tale to tell. Porcelain tea sets, perhaps imported from China, sat alongside handcrafted items from distant lands, each piece a souvenir of far-flung adventures. The cabinets, in essence, were storytellers, whispering tales of exploration and adventure to anyone who paused to admire their contents. They were also status symbols, showcasing the wealth and refinement of the home's occupants. Gazing into the hearth, we see more than just a source of warmth. We glimpse a gathering place, a focal point of family life in these grand houses. Mantels adorned with intricate carvings or inlaid tiles frame the roaring flames, providing a backdrop for intimate family moments. This was where stories were shared, plans were made, and the day's events were discussed. It was a place of connection, of sharing, and in the flickering light, of reflection. Beyond the hearth, however, the reality of Nantucket's industry was never far from the surface. Every log that warmed the fire had its counterpart in the sea, harvested and processed through a system that connected these grand homes to the rugged world of whaling. If you find yourself wandering through the streets of Nantucket today, you might pause to admire the well-preserved architecture or the quaint charm of the town. But as you do, imagine the echoes of the past resonating through the walls of these grand houses. Picture the men and women who once graced these rooms, their laughter mingling with the ticking clocks, their voices weaving tales of adventure and trade. Through the windows, hear the distant call of ships returning home, bringing with them the bounty of the sea and the promise of another day in paradise. The houses whisper stories of a time gone by, a time when whaling was king and Nantucket was a jewel in the crown of New England. As night falls and the shadows lengthen, these houses seem to sigh, their whispers growing softer, their secrets safely tucked away until the next curious soul stumbles upon them. In the quiet moments that follow, we are left to ponder the lives that unfolded within these walls, the laughter, the joy, the sorrow, and the hopes that once filled these rooms. The grand houses of Nantucket are more than just historical landmarks. They are portals to the past, inviting us to step inside and experience a world where luxury met peril, where fortunes were made and lives were touched by the boundless spirit of adventure. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my channel. Today, I am going to tell you about the curious case of a young man named Thomas Nickerson who survived 3 shipwrecks. That's right, three shipwrecks and lived to tell the tale. Now, there have been many stories about survival on whaling ships before, but what makes Nickerson's account different is that he was only 14 when his first adventure began. He was just a cabin boy. So what was life like aboard a whaling ship for a teenager in the 1820s? Stick around to find out. You won't want to miss this. Now let us leave the open sea now. Step back from the damp decks, the creak of rigging, and the endless gray horizon. Imagine instead that you are walking along the narrow streets of Nantucket in the middle of the 19th century. The salt air is still there, carried on the wind, but around you are tall, elegant houses built of brick and wood, their windows gleaming, their gardens carefully tended. These were the homes of merchants and shipowners, those who grew wealthy from the perilous labors of men at sea. Inside one of these mansions, the world feels very different. Enter a hallway with polished wood floors and walls hung with nautical paintings. The air is warm, perfumed faintly by tea steeping in porcelain cups. Lamps filled with whale oil glow softly, their lights steady and bright, illuminating spaces filled with treasures brought from across the globe. In the dining room, a long polished table stretches out, set with fine china imported from China, silver cutlery, and crystal glasses. On the sideboard, there may be ivory curios, delicately carved, reminders of distant voyages. Dinner itself might feature imported spices, preserved fruits, and tea carried home by ships that crossed half the world. For these families, whale oil was not just a source of light, it was the key to a lifestyle of refinement, culture, and worldly connection. The rhythm of life here was calm, measured, and secure, so unlike the restless days at sea. Women of these households managed social calls, embroidery, and the running of large homes. Children studied by the clear light of whale oil lamps, reading books that connected them to a wider intellectual world. Merchants spoke of investments, voyages, and markets, their wealth built on the risks endured by crews they rarely saw. Step into a parlor and you may hear music played on a pianoforte, or see guests sipping tea while discussing politics and the news of the day. Travel journals and curios filled the shelves. Shells from the South Seas, silk from India, or lacquered boxes from Japan. These objects were reminders that Nantucket, though a small island, was deeply tied to the world beyond its shores. And yet, beneath this polished surface, there was always the quiet awareness of risk. Each voyage that enriched these households carried with it the possibility of loss. Wives waited for years at a time for husbands to return, never knowing if the sea would give them back. Children grew up in houses filled with wealth, but also with absence. The oil that fueled their lamps came at a cost paid in the lives and labor of men whose days were far less comfortable. In this way, Nantucket itself embodied a contrast, the hardship of whaling and the comfort it provided to those on land. The groaning ship and the elegant mansion were two halves of the same story, forever linked. And so, as we wander softly through these quiet rooms, where whale oil lamps flicker and polished wood gleams in the lamplight, we may reflect on the strange balance of the 19th century whaling world. Wealth and suffering, elegance and danger, risk and reward, each depended upon the other. When Thomas Nickerson boarded the whale ship, he had no idea of the adventures that lay ahead. Aboard this vessel named the London, Nickerson worked hard, performing tasks like swabbing decks, tending sails, and assisting with line and harpoon. His respawn as a cabin boy were vital to the smooth functioning of the ship. Now imagine for a moment that you are Thomas, standing at the railing watching the shoreline of Nantucket fade into the horizon. The salt spray on your face, the creaking of the ship beneath your feet, the cries of gulls overhead, all blending into the vast soundscape of the sea. Days turn into weeks as you watch the sun rise and set over the endless expanse of water. Here's what Thomas experienced during those long months at sea. The routine of daily life aboard the whale ship was both arduous and monotonous. With an early start before dawn, the crew engaged in essential tasks like cleaning the decks, repairing equipment, and readying the ship for the day's work. The hunt for whales could commence. Using long hooks, sailors hauled in heavy barrels of water, a laborious process made more challenging by the constant rocking of the ship. Once the barrels were secured, the crew would turn their attention to the task of preparing the ship's lines, a delicate operation that required skill and precision. Amidst this activity, the cabin boy's duties were equally important. Assigned to the captain, he assisted with chart reading, helped preserve fish, and performed odd jobs as needed. Meals aboard the whale ship were a simple affair, consisting mainly of salted meat and biscuits for sustenance. However, when the ship reached calmer waters, sailors could enjoy the luxury of fresh fish caught by hand. The monotony of life at sea was occasionally broken by the excitement of encountering whales. When a sighting occurred, the crew would fall into action, racing towards the animal and maneuvering the ship for the best harpooning position. As the cabin boy, Thomas Nickerson likely played a role in preparing and launching the harpoons. The successful capture of a whale was cause for celebration and a welcome change in the monotonous routine. However, the process of stripping and processing the whale demanded hard work. The crew would laboriously cut away blubber and bone, extracting the valuable oil that sustained them through the long months at sea. Injuries were not uncommon aboard the whale ships, ranging from rope burns to severe cuts. While the cabin boy was not directly involved in the dangerous aspects of whaling, he was present during the risky encounters with whales and could potentially face harm during processing. The ship itself was a microcosm of society, complete with its own social hierarchy. The captain held the highest rank, followed by officers and then the crew. The cabin boy was at the bottom of this social ladder, but was nonetheless an integral part of the ship's operations. Communication between crew members was crucial for the ship's success. Sailors developed their own language and customs to facilitate teamwork and maintain order. The cabin boy would have learned these nuances of maritime life through observation and interaction with others. Loneliness was a constant companion for the cabin boy. Spending months at sea without land in sight took a toll on the crew's mental health. The vastness of the ocean and the isolation it brought were a stark reminder of the challenges they faced. Despite the hardships, the completion of the voyage with a successful return to port was a moment of triumph for the entire crew. The cabin boy, having played his part in this epic journey, would share in the sense of accomplishment, though likely eager to set foot on solid ground once more. Life for a cabin boy aboard a whale ship in the 1820s was an experience of contrasts, combining the excitement of adventure with the challenges of isolation, hard work, and the constant threat of danger. It was a unique perspective on the world shaped by the rhythms of the sea and the demands of a perilous trade. As Thomas grew older, he continued to work on whaling ships, gaining experience and knowledge. He had no idea that soon his skills would be put to the test in a way he never imagined possible. In 1820, the whale ship he was aboard encountered a terrible storm that caused the vessel to run aground on a treacherous sandbar. Luckily, a rescue ship arrived in time to save the crew, including Thomas. Rescued, but not for long. Another ship soon hired him for a voyage to the South Seas, but within just 3 months, disaster struck again. This time, the whale ship was captured by a group of pirates. They plundered the ship and left the crew, including Thomas, stranded on a desert island. With nothing but the clothes on their backs and the supplies on hand, the crew had to build a shelter and find food. They managed to survive by eating berries, drinking rainwater, and sleeping in their makeshift shelter. After 18 long months, they were finally rescued, but not before enduring hunger, thirst, and the elements. Miraculously, Thomas survived yet again, returning home to Nantucket with even more tales to tell. So you can see how thrilling and dangerous life was for those at sea. If you love stories about survival, then make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an exciting episode. And while you're at it, be sure to leave a like as well. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you next time for another amazing adventure. From the darkest depths of the Essex to the Gilded Age parlors of Nantucket's elite, we've journeyed through a world shaped by the mighty whale. Tonight, our voyage began in the cramped, dark quarters of a whaling ship. We huddled with the crew, feeling the bone-deep chill of the unending sea. The smell of salt and decay hung heavy in the air, a stark reminder of the harsh reality of their lives. Then we stepped into the shoes of the captains, men like George Pollard and Obed Hendricks, whose lives were as vast and unpredictable as the ocean itself. Through their stories, we saw the grandeur of the whaling industry, the thrill of the hunt, and the quiet moments of contemplation that a life at sea allowed for. But our journey took a darker turn as we boarded the Essex. Here, in the heart of the vast Pacific, we encountered the terrifying power of nature. The sinking of the Essex was not just a story of survival, but a haunting reminder of man's fragility in the face of the elements. We saw the best and worst of humanity in those who lived and died aboard the Essex, a testament to the indomitable spirit that yearns for freedom in the darkness that can consume even the brightest souls. Finally, we found ourselves transported to the opulent parlors of Nantucket's elite. Here, the whale oil lamp flickered, casting long shadows that danced to the rhythm of the waves outside. We sipped tea, savoring the warmth that radiated not just from the drink, but from the crackling fire that chased away the endless cold of the sea. In this world of polished wood and fine fabrics, We saw the tangible result of the industry that had shaped an entire town. As we close this chapter of our journey, we are left with a profound sense of the contrast that defined the whaling era. From the rough hands of the sailors to the manicured hands of the elite, all were connected by an unbreakable bond to the mighty whale. The rocking of the boat beneath us, the gentle sway that mimics the heartbeat of the ocean, carries us back to the Essex, a somber reminder of the price paid for the comforts we now enjoy. As you drift now towards sleep, let the steady cadence of history rock you into rest. Dream of the endless sea and the mighty whale, and know that their story, like the rhythm of the waves, will forever be a part of our world. Good night.
Tonight's story comes to a close. If your eyes have gently shut, then I wish you a deep, peaceful sleep. Until we meet again in the next dream.